Welcome to a new video in international trade. Today's topic is terms of trade, measurement and types. This is a basic concept in international trade, and you might have heard about the term TOT or terms of trade. Terms of trade is a kind of index of trade. This is a kind of trade index. And how does it measure terms of trade? Terms of trade for two commodity trade between nations is the ratio of export price to import price. That means the price of export by price of import is called the terms of trade of a nation for two commodity trade. That means two commodity trade between two nations. At the same time, terms of trade for many commodities trade, as we see in the current world, the terms of trade is calculated by measuring export price index by import price index. That means the price index of export commodities divided by the price index of import commodities. That is the terms of trade for many commodities trade between two nations. As we see, for example, India and United States, they are the largest huge trade partners in the present world, and many commodities and services have been exported and imported mutually. So terms of trade for many commodities can be calculated by measuring export price index divided by import price index. So in general, whenever the export receipts are increasing in relation to import payments, terms of trade is supposed to increase. At the same time, when export receipts decline with respect to import bill payment, the terms of trade is supposed to deteriorate. So as I said, terms of trade can be measured by dividing the export price by import price, and the ratio can be multiplied by 100 to express the figure in percentage. Otherwise the figure will be in between, it will be around 1, that may be 0.5, that may be 1.5, and it can be easily multiplied by 100 to express the terms of trade of a nation in percentage. And that can be calculated for two nations, for two commodities or many commodities. The equation for measuring the terms of trade is Px by Py into 100. Px is the price of export, Py is the price of import. It can be multiplied by 100, then we will receive the terms of trade in percentage. The Px may be the price index of exported commodities, and Py may be the price index of import commodities for many commodities trade between two nations. If terms of trade is 100% or 1 or 100%, then the price of export price index will be equal to import price index or import price. If terms of trade is 50%, then price of export that the nation is receiving from export is less than the import price that we have to pay. So that means terms of trade is deteriorated or worse off for the nation. And at the same time, if terms of trade is more than 100, suppose 150, that means the export price is greater than the price of import. So that means the terms of trade of the nation has improved by 50%. So through this video I am going to look at the 5 types of terms of trade. First one is commodity or net barter terms of trade. Second one is income terms of trade. Third one is single factorial terms of trade. Fourth one is double factorial terms of trade, and fifth one is utility terms of trade. The first one in the list is commodity terms of trade or net barter terms of trade. So this is the first one, and this is the common terms of trade. This is the commonly used terms of trade. Commonly used terms of trade is commodity terms of trade or net barter terms of trade. This is calculated by measuring export price by import price, price of export by price of import, that is Px by Py. This is the terms of trade, commodity terms of trade or net barter terms of trade. And if we include many commodities for the trade between India and United States, we can measure the terms of trade for India and US by considering the price index of export commodities that we are exporting to United States and price index of import commodities in India that are importing from United States to India. So this is the ratio of export price to import price. This is called the net barter terms of trade, as we find the net value of export and import. Second one in the list of types of terms of trade is income terms of trade. Income terms of trade shows the capacity of a nation for import, as income shows the purchasing power of a person or a nation. So this shows the capacity of a nation for import of commodities and services. So this is much more important type of terms of trade. So when we multiply the commodity terms of trade or net barter terms of trade with quantity of export, total export quantity, then we will receive the income terms of trade. As income, then price into quantity is total revenue or income. In the same fashion, we can measure the income terms of trade. That means the price of X, that is export price, by import price into total export quantity. This then we will see the income terms of trade, which shows the capacity of a nation for import of commodities and services. A third one in the list of types of terms of trade is single factorial terms of trade. Single factorial terms of trade measures the purchasing power of factors embodied in exports of a nation. Single factorial terms of trade measures the amount of import that which can be obtained against the factors employed in the export sector. Both labor and capital are considered. So single factorial terms of trade measures the import quantity that can be obtained using the factors employed in the export sector. So it shows the productivity of factors employed in the whole export sector of a nation. Before seeing how does it measure, if it is 100, if single factorial terms of trade is 100%, then that means the terms of trade is not worse off, is not better off, it is neutral, and it does mean that the factors in export sector is equal to the factors factors employed in the import sector. And if it is more than 100%, more import can be done, more import can be settled using the factors employed in the export sector. If it is less than 100%, that means the terms of trade is worse off or deteriorated for the nation. That means less import can be done, only less import can be done with the factors employed in the export sector. Here the factors are not measured numerically, it is measured using the value total of factors employed in the export sector. It is measured in terms of currency value. For example, the factors value of wage and interest in terms of currency. That means if it is more than 100%, more import can be done. If it is less than 100%, less import can be done with the factors employed in the export sector. In other words, single factorial terms of trade of a nation is the ratio of value of factor employment in export sector to the import value. This is the factor employment export sector's factor employment value to the value of import. That means the value of single factor terms of trade is equal to total value of factors in the export sector divided by the value of import. This is a single factorial terms of trade. So it measures the factor content in the export sector, not import. It is given import also, that is done by mistake. So this measures the factor content employed in the export sector only, and if the factor employment is in export is greater, that means more factors are required to import. That means the terms of trade is not better off, it is worse off, it is deteriorated. Single factorial terms of trade can be multiplied by can be measured by multiplying the factor productivity index in the export sector of a nation with the net barter terms of trade or the commodity terms of trade. That means S stands for single factorial terms of trade. Px is equal to the price of export, price index of export, divided by Pm, that is the price index of import commodities. This is a commodity terms of trade or net barter terms of trade that we have discussed in the first. So that can be multiplied with by Zx. Zx refers to the productivity index of factors employed in export. Productivity index has to be measured if it is available, which is done by somebody else, that can be used to measure single factorial terms of trade. So factors, let me say it again, factors include labor and capital mainly. So in order to get the single factorial terms of trade, we need to multiply the productivity index of factors employed in the export sector with the commodity terms of trade or net barter terms of trade. So it refers to the productivity of factors. And suppose factor productivity rose from 110 to 130. So let us look an example first. S is equal to 95 by 110 into 130. Its value is 0.8636 into 130. Then the total final net value single factorial terms of trade is 112.27. This is more than 100. That means as per the theoretical view, if terms of trade is more than 100% for a nation, then that means the nation's terms of trade is better off. It has improved by 12.27%. So this is materialized, this has happened although the price of export is less than the price of import. So this is done as the productivity of factors embodied in export is greater, or it rose significantly to 130 from 110. This, remind you, this is the productivity index. So it is multiplied with commodity terms of trade, 95 by 110, and then 0.8636 into 130, that is 102 12.27. So this is the way in which single factorial terms of trade can be measured. A fourth one in the list of types of terms of trade is double factorial terms of trade, as opposite of as an extension of a single factorial terms of trade. Under single factorial terms of trade, the factors labor and capital, factors employed in the productivity of factors employed in export sector was measured, only export sector was measured, but here we add the productivity of factors in both export and import sectors of a nation. So this is double factorial terms of trade. It doesn't mean two factors. So even under single factorial terms of trade, two factors productivity index in only export sector, that is only single sectoral, that is single sectoral terms of trade, and here in double sectoral factoral terms of trade. The factors productivity of factors employed in both export and import of a nation are measured. So this is the ratio of export productivity of factors to import productivity of factor. That means simply double factorial terms of trade is equal to export productivity of labor and capital divided by import productivity of labor and capital, or productivity of factors employed in export sector divided by productivity of factors employed in import sector of a nation. That is double factorial terms of trade. If its value is also measured in percentage, if it is 100%, that means the country is in the country's factor productivity is neutrally organized. If it is less than 100%, the terms of trade is deteriorating for a nation, as its export productivity is not enough to maintain, to appropriate the import productivity. If it is more than 100%, it is improved, and the export productivity is much more enough to appropriate the import. So this is helpful in understanding the efficiency of factors in both export and import sectors. So mathematically, double factorial terms of trade, D is equal to Px by Pm, that is the price of export by price of import, or export price index divided by import price index, into Zx by Zm. Zx is the productivity of factors in the export sector, and divided by Zm refers to the productivity of factors employed in the import sector. That means the domestic nation's productivity of factors, that is the Zm refers to the productivity of factors embodied in the import of a nation. So it can be multiplied by 100 to get the figure in percentage. And so Zx, as I said, is the index of productivity of all factors in export sector. Zm refers to import factors productivity in import sector. And the last line in the slide gives you the real figures. D is equal to 95 by 100, and 95 is a Px, 100 is a Pm, into 130 Zx, 105 is Zm. So the productivity is of factors in export is greater than the productivity of factors employed in import sector. So the final figure is 106.92, that is more than 100%. This figure is in percentage. So the nation's productivity of factors employed in the export sector is much more enough to appropriate the import. So its productivity is greater than the factors productivity of factors employed in the import sector. Finally, the fifth in the list of types of terms of trade is utility terms of trade. So this is to explain the welfare changes of export and import of a nation. So it depends on the disutility of exported commodity and utility of imported commodity. Why does we call the disutility of export and utility of import? So export is kind of giving, and import is a kind of receiving the commodity, not income. So when we give more commodities having more utility for the import import commodities having more utility, so it will affect the utility terms of trade or welfare status of a nation. So this is a kind of index of change in disutility of producing a unit of export, and change in utility from import. So how do we get the utility terms of trade? Utility terms of trade can be obtained in the manner in which commodity terms of trade is measured. Commodity terms of trade is equal to Px by Py into 100. So Px is the price of export, Py is the price of import. So here we need to add the utility that may be measured cardinally or ordinally, and however it is difficult to measure the utility of commodities in either way. It is, if even if it is cardinally measured or ordinally measured, it is very hard to measure utility of a commodity in terms of number or in terms of ordinal form. So when we are able to measure the utility, that utility we need to add that utility with price of export and price of import. So simply we need to add the utility of export commodities in Px. That is, this is actually not Px, this is the utility of X, export commodity, divided by utility of import commodity, that is UM. This is utility of import commodity. So whenever the utility of export is equal to disutility of export, then that means terms of trade will be indifferent. It remains unchanged. It will be in neutral situation if utility terms of trade is greater than, if utility from import that we receive is greater than the disutility from the export of export commodities. That means terms of trade is improving, terms of trade is better off. At the same time, if the utility from import is less than the disutility from export, that means the terms of trade of a nation is worse off or it is deteriorating.